started work, I remember I did my training in Abangan Sur, and we were dumping hay. So to do the mushroom culture, we did a hog dispersal program in Bulacan. But my most challenging activity was actually when I went to the province, when I went up to Cotabato, because we had a logging and a plywood manufacturing operation, and there was a whole community to take care of. And I remember that we built housing, we built a school, a public school, we tied up with the Notre Dame Fathers to put up a high school. We organized the women into cooperatives. We organized credit unions. We did skills development for the youth. So you will notice that there is no need to differentiate, given the theme of Ateneo's this sesquicentennial celebration. There is no need to differentiate between mobilizing communities or connecting business and communities with CSR, since the work that we do naturally entails the building up of communities and the building up of the human capacity of individuals. As I mentioned, that our roots, my roots, particularly in CSR, were deeply steeped in our Filipino values and further reinforced by our faith, faith-based values. And I remember that, like most organizations, we started with the evolution of CSR in the Philippines. That's why I decided to use it. It's pretty much the same as our evolution as an institution. So you will see there the historical framework or background, and I think most of you are familiar. Actually, when I got this framework, I think this was originally done by PBSP, but I added the 50s, so they're teasing me. I'm the only one who remembers what it was like in the 50s. But sabi ko, please, I remember the stories from my parents. But really, it was post-war. It was the time for growth, for opportunities. And at the very start, they never forgot that they had an extended family of employees, of communities that they needed to take care of. And that was where everything started. As you go through the historical framework, I think most of you are familiar with what happened over the next few decades. If I stand here, or can I, well, no, just to walk you through. Kasi you better prepare because I have 52 slides. No, but I will go through them very quickly. And by the way, I had agreed that I will entertain questions as I go along, so that I will keep you awake, because 1 o'clock is not a very good time for such a lengthy presentation. So please feel free to ask questions. So the historical framework, I think, is something not new to many of you or that you are familiar with. What we tried to do was to connect what was happening in terms of CSR through the different decades, from the post-war decade to the Marcos era, to the Cory government era, to the growth years supposedly that we are now experiencing, and finally to the 2000, to this decade. You will notice, and I feel very strongly about this, there was no CSR strategy. There was no technique, or to speak of, in the early 50s. But many corporations and many entrepreneurs already expressed their core values, their Filipino values, by getting involved in the community. But the term CSR had not even been used in business parlance. So there was no CSR strategy. It was purely a manifestation of our values. However, during the crisis years, we're very proud, and I always include PBSP, because they were truly the first model of an organized business sector addressing the poverty issues during the Marcos dictatorship. And then as we moved on to the 80s, which was the decade or the year when Cory was in, or the new government, we had an overpouring of grants from the world, and we had an exponential growth of NGOs, and we introduced the concept of people power. And that people empowerment, as you all know, is very much alive in the communities where we work. The growth years, it was around this time. The terms, you notice the terms that are used are no CSR. However, we began with organized. People use the term corporate giving, corporate philanthropy, corporate citizenship. There is no one term that is used to connote the involvement of business in social issues. However, organizations were set up, and you notice around in the 90s, I think that in Asia, we have the most models in terms of organized corporate engagement, such as the Corporate Network for Disaster Response, such as the PBE, the Philippine Business for the Environment, the RVR, Corporate Citizen Center, and then the CEO Policy Fora, and of course, the League of Corporate Foundations. In terms of the CSR stage, we have the charity or philanthropy moving up to this decade, and then moving towards engagement, innovation, and linkage. And today, we are emphasizing or espousing integration and alignment. I would like to say, from a friend's point of view, that the development of CSR is never or isn't linear. We don't move from one stage to the other. Rather, we work or operate in a continuum so that at any given point, the majority or the bulk of our resources may be geared towards a more developmental approach. However, you still can't avoid requests from barangay captains and from the church. I'm sorry to say the church, but that's pure philanthropy. Now, we still need to give. But if we had a choice, we would move towards a more developmental approach. Okay, to backtrack a bit, how do we understand CSR today? As I said, it's called by many names, but there is no one name that one organization or one country can claim to be just the meaning of CSR. I used Friedman actually to defend him, because people always say, or they always accredit the statement, the business of business is business, to Milton Friedman. But actually, what he said naman was that without fraud or deception. So he still believed, and as most businessmen believe, that the primary objective of business is to provide goods and services to a market with profit. And so he adds, without fraud or deception. So there is a bit of governance issue in that statement, although he does not talk about getting involved in social issues. So we move to the other definitions of CSR, and this is the most generally accepted definition from the World Business Council. I will not read out everything for you because that's going to be too lengthy. But I'd just like to mention that the classic examples of companies that are built to last speak of a vision higher than themselves. Actually, very few of them mention the word profit. More often than not, what they espouse are their own vision. As long as people have dreams, that Walt Disney will always be there, or to serve humanity, or health for Merck Sharp, it is really fulfilling a dream, or